You're listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast, episode number 23. What are you capable of? It may sound strange to hear, but most of us have no idea what our strengths and talents are, therefore what we're capable of. Take, for instance, if you're diagnosed with a disability or serious illness. Nearly every single piece of information you'll find about living your life with this condition will outline everything you can't do. But what about everything you can do? Today we're talking about all the things we tell ourselves we can't do instead of discovering what we're actually capable of doing. Our minds effectively hold the key for the transition we're looking to make here, going from I can't to, oh yeah, watch me. My guest today, Elaine Hopkins, is a writer, speaker, coach, hypnotherapist, and walker. She's also living with dyspraxia, a condition that affects her coordination, balance, memory, and speech. And what's so amazing is that Elaine didn't discover she had dyspraxia until she was 59. That meant that she was always confused and viewed all her symptoms as her being incapable and stupid, making her feel ashamed. That is, until a chance remark by a neuroscience professor changed her life forever, prompting her to explore and change her relationship with her dyspraxia and herself by going on a 500-kilometer hike. 6 years and 5,000 kilometers later, Elaine is no longer confused. On her transformative path, she realized she was holding herself back when she didn't need to. Yes, her dyspraxia comes with challenges, but after walking 2,000 kilometers by herself without a map, she realized life is for living, not for being coped with. Elaine now spends her time walking, writing, and speaking in her quest to spread the word that we can all be more than our labels and conditions. Are you excited to learn what those words were that changed Elaine's life? Will they change yours? I can't wait for you to find out. So, let's dive right in and let you meet my friend, Elaine.
You're listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast, where we firmly believe that you, and only you, have the power to make the changes you seek in your life. Survivor of 10 years of child abuse, Lisa Sabaniak, will help you to empower yourself to overcome your limitations in whatever form they take, to build the life you truly deserve. It's time to hear from fellow experts who know firsthand what building a successful and satisfying life because of our past experiences is like, and exactly what it takes to do it. If you're ready, willing and able to get honest with yourself, roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty with the hard work that lasting change takes, you're in the right place. Here's your host, NLP practitioner, speaker, Reiki master, author, and chipaholic, Lisa Sabaniak.
This episode is dedicated to my online mini course, Becoming Fulfilled and Satisfied with Your Life. If you're tired of putting in so much effort trying to build your career, have happy relationships, attract your dream partner, feel confident with your decisions, have money in your savings account, have enough time in the day to do everything without burning out, and feel balanced both physically and emotionally, then this is your solution. Becoming fulfilled and satisfied with your life includes videos on your belief systems, opportunities, and the wheel of life, a course workbook, and meditations to help support you in your learning to shift into a fulfilling and satisfying life. And you can enroll today for just £7.20. To grab hold of this offer, visit lifelikeyoumeanit.com/fulfilled. This link is also in the show notes. And hello, Elaine. Welcome to the show. It's such an honor to have you on today.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here.
So I'm sure there's a lot of people in the audience that maybe have heard the word dyspraxia, or maybe this is the first time that they've ever heard it. Let's just start there. Can you just share with us what is dyspraxia and how did you actually discover that you had it?
Yes, of course. It's a neurological condition. It's inherited. It's a close cousin of dyslexia, but it's much less well known. And it affects things like balance, coordination, memory, and speech. So at one point in its history, it used to be called Clumsy Child Syndrome, which is not helpful because of the lack of coordination, people who have it are clumsy, but that gives the impression that you grow out of it as you get older, and you don't. It's a lifelong condition.
Of course.
And I discovered I had it because my goddaughter is the daughter of my best friend from school, and she got diagnosed with it at her school. And one day I was talking to her, and she was really excited because she'd read this book about dyspraxia written by this amazing 17-year-old. And she was so enthusiastic, and I'm a writer, so I love books, that I bought a copy of this book. It's called Caged in Chaos. And I read it. And for the first time, I understood that I had this thing called dyspraxia, because all of a sudden my life made sense.
Wow.
And that was extraordinary.
Yeah. So what was it like? Because you were 59 by the time you figured this out. What was it like living for 59 years with a condition like this that you had no idea that you had? I mean, it must have made you feel like you were different from other people. Why couldn't you do some of the things that other people could do?
Yes, I'd always felt that, because I think probably my biggest problem was that I couldn't tell my right from my left, and I had no sense of direction. So even things like finding my way around school buildings and work buildings were incredibly difficult for me. And also when I was at school, when I was 4, we had a new gym teacher, and she decided to teach us some dance steps. And I was the only girl in a class of 30 that couldn't learn these dance steps, which was hugely embarrassing and humiliating, which was bad enough. But when I got back up to the classroom, and I was always the last back up to the classroom because I struggled with the buttons and zips on my school uniform, I opened the door, and there was one American girl in my class, and she was at the front, and she was demonstrating my dance steps. And as I opened the door, I heard her say the words, "Can you believe that anyone can be quite that stupid?"
Oh, gosh.
And as a 4-year-old, I just took that on as part of my identity. So from then on, I just decided that I would have to effectively live my life in secret. I would have to hide all the things that I couldn't do. And that's what I did, and I did it very effectively. I became incredibly adept, because I used to fall over every single day because my balance was that bad. And every time I fell over, I never made a sound. And even today, when I fall over, I don't make a sound, because I don't want to draw people's attention to how many times I've fallen over.
Right.
But when I discovered I can remember just sitting here in my living room, and I was just seeing all these scenes from my life, and it just all made sense.
Wow. So it just kind of all came together in that moment.
Yes. And I lost, because I'd always been confused, because I thought, why? I know people have different abilities, but I just thought, why? Because it seemed to me that I couldn't do the simple things.
Right. So then, I mean, if you've got 59 years of adapting in this kind of way, where you just lived in this kind of hidden world where you're making sounds when you fall over, like you say, you still don't do that. I mean, even people that don't have dyspraxia, we all do this. Our core beliefs are set by the time we're 7 years old. And it's from things like that happening, right? You feeling like you're stupid because of some 4-year-old little girl making fun of you in that moment. And your whole identity becomes wrapped around that and becomes a core belief of who you are. And then fast forward another 55 years, when you start discovering that there's actually a reason behind this, and that really you should be quite proud of yourself for being able to cope and do all of the things that you have done with this condition. But it's hard to just shift in that moment, because this belief that you are stupid, that you can't do things like other people, that you need to hide who you really are and be ashamed of that, that's ingrained in there. So how do you cope with that? And have you been able to shift any of those beliefs now?
Well, I mean, fortunately, by that stage, I'd done a lot of personal development work and I'd actually trained as a coach. But I think what shocked me was, referring back to what you just said, just how strong that limiting self-belief was about my stupidity. Because academically, I was good. I went to university, I got a degree, I had a successful career. And it's funny because every time I would talk about my school days with my best friend, she would look at me and say, "But Elaine, we were the clever ones." And I'm thinking, no, we weren't. I'm stupid. And just recently, I found my reports from my schools up in the attic, and I was reading them, and I was thinking, oh God, you know what? I was actually quite bright.
Yeah.
But I never believed that I was anything other than stupid.
Wow. And so how do you feel about yourself now? What steps did you take to try to shift that?
I think I'd always thought that everybody else was good at the things that I wasn't. So I suddenly start, when you shift your lens slightly, you notice different things. So I began to notice that other people fell over, that other people got lost, that other people didn't automatically know how to get from A to B. And that was very reassuring. But the really huge breakthrough came one day in 2013 when I was studying neuroscience as part of extending my coaching qualifications. And at the time, I was coaching a very bright 17-year-old who had dyslexia. And he desperately wanted to be a mining engineer. So he was taking maths and all these science exams that had all these complicated symbols. And he was struggling because of his dyslexia.
Yeah.
So during the course, I said to the professor, I just wanted to ask her if there was anything that she could tell me about dyslexia that I could use to help my client. And she just said one of those sentences that turned out to be life-changing, because she said to me, whenever there's a deficit in one part of the brain, there'll be a compensating abundance in another.
Oh, I love that.
And I thought, oh, wow, that's what a great thing to tell this young lad.
Yeah.
So I came home, and a couple of days later, sometimes you have really productive phases where you're not actually doing anything. So I wasn't doing anything, and I wasn't thinking about it in particular, but I suddenly realized that my compensating abundance is my gift with words. I've always been a writer. I earned a very good living as a financial copywriter in London. And I just thought, that's it. That's what my compensating abundance is. And that was the real moment when things changed, because the moment I realized that, another question popped into my head. And that question was, would you give up your gift with words if you knew it would banish the dyspraxia? And the answer was no. And it was a really loud, vehement no. And it arrived in an instant.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
it is awesome because in that moment, the dyspraxia is just a trade-off. The dyspraxia is the price I pay for having my gift with words. And that changes it.
That's really beautiful. Now, you're a writer, which some people might find would be quite challenging with the dyspraxia, but you also have taken on this endeavor with walking. So tell us about this, because it started out with you wanting to walk, was it 500 kilometers? And now it's just kind of taken on a life of its own over here. So tell us about this walking and struggles that you have with it, but also you obviously are having quite a lot of benefits from it. It's changing your life.
Oh, yeah, I just love it. Funnily enough, that happened on the same day as the revelation about the compensating abundance. So I was sitting in my living room and my brain suddenly flipped forward 20 years. And I thought, if I don't do something different, this is all there is. Because at this point, as well as the dyspraxia, I also had a 30-year history of chronic back pain and chronic migraines. So my life had narrowed without me realizing it. And I was angry. In fact, I was so angry that I threw my slippers at the remote control of the television. And I'd never thrown anything in anger in my life before. I come from one of those families that just doesn't really do anger.
Right.
And I was just consumed with it. And I thought, okay, you just need to reach some kind of more settled place before you go to bed, or you're not going to sleep. And I just had this sense that in the morning I would know what to do. So I woke up, and in the morning there was this instinct in my head saying, go and walk the Camino de Santiago, which is this 500-kilometer route across Spain. And I knew about it because I'd been on it once before, and on a cycling trip. And on the penultimate day, I'd had a very serious accident and I'd almost died. I actually stopped breathing.
Oh my gosh.
So I had this instinct in my head, and my logical mind is going to be, what? You've been there once before and you almost died. What do you want to go back for?
Yeah.
And it was a completely bonkers idea, because at this point, I couldn't even walk from my house to the underground, which is a 15-minute walk, without sitting down. That's how bad the pain was.
Oh, wow.
But the really bizarre thing was, it was such a strong instinct that I just ignored all that. I didn't get involved in the how or the what or the why. I just thought, right, I'm going to do this. And I'd already met a guy who inspires people to walk this route, and he takes them. So I phoned him up and said, will you take me on the Camino just for a week? And he said yes. So we planned it all out. And this was Christmas. And we were going to walk the last 50 miles of it. And we were going to go in September. And I remember saying to him, I really don't know how I'm going to walk 50 miles when I can't even walk 1 mile at the minute. And he said, well, that's okay. You've got 9 months. And we had a friend in common who organises walks in Surrey. So he said, why don't you phone up Sarah and ask if you can join her next walk? So I did, and I said, I don't know whether I'll be able to do it. And she said, well, don't worry, because you can just sit down and we'll come back and pick you up on the way back. And as it turned out, I did walk 5 miles that day. And that was extraordinary. And I can't tell you what enabled me to do that. But having done that, I just started walking longer and longer distances. And in the end, we didn't go in September. We went in May because I was ready to go.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Now, were you scared at all about doing it with your condition, the riskiness of it, of needing? So, I mean, I know you had the back pain and things that you were dealing with there, and physically weren't sure how many times you'd need to stop and rest and whatnot. But did the dyspraxia come into that as well, where you were maybe frightened or worried at least?
I think I knew I'd be all right because I knew my friend Adam would look after me. But no, I just had this absolute conviction that there was something here, that there was some reason for me to go. So I didn't allow myself. I was going to say I didn't allow myself to go into that place of fear, but I honestly don't think I ever felt it. It was just this really strong pull to go and do this.
Wow. It was like your higher self talking to you, saying, Elaine, you need to do this. That's amazing. So tell us about what you learned as a result of doing this.
As a result of doing that first week, and at this point I thought that was all I was going to do, on one day I walked 40 kilometres. We hadn't planned to do it. It just happened. And I can just remember collapsing in the hotel room and just about having enough oomph left to run a bath, and just thinking we're all capable of so much more than we think we are.
Yes. And so how did that turn into wanting to walk 5,000 kilometers? Because that's a little bit of a jump.
Yeah. Well, the strange thing was, I came back home after that week and I had absolutely no intention of going back. And at this point, I was working as a freelance copywriter. So one morning I was at my keyboard. I think I was writing a property newsletter at the time. And my fingers just wandered off and booked a flight to Spain. and then renewed my travel insurance. And I thought, oh, okay, because we'd walked the first, I don't know, 100 kilometres, I think, of the Camino. And I thought, oh, okay, so I'm going back to walk the rest of it. So I finished my work commitments and then I went back to Spain. And because I'm an introvert, I really didn't have any qualms about walking it all by myself. But on my this is extraordinary, but on my very first evening, I met an American woman and I thought, oh, I quite like her. So we left the hostel at the same time in the morning and we just started walking together. And the first thing we did was get lost. And I thought, oh, hello, which should perhaps have given me a clue as to what was about to unfold, but it didn't. So the first thing I learned about this woman is that she's a coach, as am I. The second thing I learned is that she has dyspraxia. And I'm thinking,
come on.
This is stranger than fiction.
What are the odds of that happening?
I know. And I walked with her for 20 days. And that was one of the most healing experiences of my life, because I'd never spent time with anybody who had dyspraxia before. And it was just like seeing myself reflected back at me, but in a very kindly light.
Right.
So we just laughed at one another.
That's amazing.
And it was just beautiful. So I then walked the 500, and probably one of the most extraordinary things of all is I came home and my friend Adam, my Camino mentor, had arranged for me to give a speech at the charity that looks after pilgrims who are going to walk this route in London. So I was rehearsing my speech and I thought, oh, I know, I'll make a joke about not knowing my right hand from my left, because I never have done.
Right.
And I started to make the joke, and the next minute I was in the prayer position on the floor, because I suddenly realized in that moment that for the first time ever, I knew instinctively and without having to think about it for 5 minutes, which was my right hand and which was my left.
Oh my goodness. And
it was just one of the most astonishing moments of my entire life, because I had never, ever dreamt that that was possible.
So
I knew people without dyspraxia could do it, but for me, that was just incredible.
Yeah. So what do you think happened in that moment?
It didn't happen in that moment. When you're walking the Camino, there are yellow arrows and there are way marks.
Right.
And part of my dyspraxia is that I find it very difficult to interpret directional signs and icons and all that stuff. Right. But having to concentrate on that for that length of time has actually created new neural pathways in my brain.
That's incredible. And it's such a good point, right? Because, I mean, anybody that's listening that doesn't have dyspraxia specifically, they might be able to relate in other types of ways. And it's a great testament that, you know, when you keep at something, like even trying to build a new habit, right? Yes. Trying to have time for yourself each day, or trying to do yoga, or trying to meditate, or anything like that. It takes time to be able to develop these new skills, if you will, because you're teaching your brain. And that's exactly what you were doing without intending to do it. It's just part of what you had to do in order to do the walk.
Yes, I knew about the concept of neuroplasticity, but I think that's one of those concepts. It's there in plain sight, but it gets lost because we all acquire new skills. None of us is born with the ability to read, but we learn how to read. And to do that, we create new neural pathways. And it's just an incredibly powerful and empowering concept that we're not stuck with the brain we have now.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's so fascinating to me, just the power of our brains, right? And the amount of things that we still don't really know or understand about it, that we've got all of this knowledge behind us, and then still there's things that we just kind of forget, or we just don't know the whole complexity of it. But we're constantly evolving, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely we are.
This is the perfect spot for a quick break to talk about the planner that changed my life, Dailygreatness. These planners will absolutely blow your mind. Far from a traditional planner, these planners help you overcome your weaknesses, focus on the positive, find and follow your purpose and mission in life, set exciting goals, and follow up on those goals. We all know that our outcomes and results in life are determined by our daily habits. These planners give you the foundation for success that you need to make you more likely to succeed at achieving your goals and reaching your potential. Seriously, they're that good. They have their original version, plus one for business, success, yoga, wellness, and parents. That's 6 versions to help in any situation. To learn more, go to lifelikeyoumeanit.com/planners. Once again, that's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/planners. This link will also be in the show notes. Are you struggling with some areas of your life, disappointed that things have not turned out the way you had hoped or planned? Perhaps you're celebrating your successes in some areas of your life while really feeling you've missed the mark in others. If you've decided you are no longer comfortable with being unhappy and are ready to do the work at your own pace in the comfort of your own home to change your life to one where you feel confidently successful, fulfilled, and greatly satisfied, then my online mini course, Becoming Fulfilled and Satisfied with Your Life, is for you. Head on over to lifelikeyoumeanit.com/fulfilled to register for just £7.20 and crack open your workbook and videos to guide you every step of the way. You'll be tackling your beliefs, how to spot opportunities, and the powerful coaching tool, the Wheel of Life, all with the guidance of me, a qualified NLP practitioner, Reiki master, author, speaker, podcast host, and survivor of 10 years of child abuse. That link again is lifelikeyoumeanit.com/fulfilled. This link is also in the show notes. AudioBooksNow is a fabulous site and app for you to use to listen to your favorite books, new and old, right from your device. You can listen in your car, while exercising, preparing dinner, cleaning the house, taking a nice bubble bath, anywhere you like. And the best part is AudioBooksNow is offering you 50% off your first audiobook. To take them up on this offer, visit lifelikeyoumeanit.com/audiobooks. That's lifelikeyoumeanit.com/audiobooks, all one word. This link is also available in the show notes. That's incredible. So I know there's a lot of different support groups out there for people that are going through pretty much anything. So I'm sure that there is dyspraxia support groups and things like that. But I think it's amazing that you obviously by circumstance just ran into this other woman who happens to have dyspraxia on the same mission as you and doing this walk. How vital do you think that was for you to have not just somebody that has dyspraxia that can relate to you, that you would maybe sit down in a different environment and talk about all the issues that you're having with dyspraxia, but to put it in an environment like that where you've got somebody that shares the same sort of struggles, but you're struggling together to kind of go over the hump, if you will, right? Kind of climb that mountain and do something really positive and make positive changes.
I think being in her company really helped me to accept myself, because there was no shame in the fact that we would both do the same things. So we would both bump into furniture, we would both drop our food down ourselves, and it was just, it seems an odd thing to say, but it was just great fun. I remember one evening we were in a 4-bed dormitory by ourselves, and she sat down on one of the lower bunks and she was just taking her clothes off to go and have a shower, and she was just inspecting her legs, and she looked up at me and said, "I really don't know where I got all these bruises from." And I just burst out laughing because I've always suffered from what I think of as unexplained bruise syndrome, because when you're as clumsy as we are, you bump into so many things and it's just normal, so you don't realise how often you've done it until you inspect yourself and think, oh, there's another 3 bruises on my legs. Yeah. And that was just incredibly healing.
Yeah, it sounds like this whole experience has really allowed yourself to fully accept yourself now and kind of deal with that anger and let that go, that, all of those different past experiences that you would have had where you would have put yourself down because of having this experience, having this condition and everything that it entails. And it sounds like you've really shifted from that into a place of full acceptance.
Yes, it no longer defines me. I mean, my brain is wired slightly differently from other people's, but then everybody's brain is wired slightly differently. And when you look at the support sites, often their focus is on what people with conditions can't do. And I find that very distressing because
Yeah.
I think that's what labels do. Whereas the flip side of that is you can focus on what you can do.
That's a really good point. That really needs to be something that we bring some more awareness to.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody that's listening to this is a member of one of those support groups or running one of those kinds of support groups and has the pull to change some of the language that's on their websites, even for people that are seeking out help. To, everybody's trying to do something that is positive when you're offering information or support
Yes.
or anything. Of course, everybody's trying to offer something positive, but you don't necessarily realize, if you're somebody like me that doesn't have that condition, I wouldn't necessarily think that there would be some kind of ingrained negativity in there by focusing on kind of the symptoms, right? You can't do this, it causes you to do this,
Yes.
when
Yeah.
really, if we can shift it so that
Yeah.
it is, of course you can have that kind of information, but right alongside it and just as big, maybe even bigger and more colorful, is all the things that you can do and all the things that you are better at because of this, right? How more of a unique person you are, and whatever. I think that would go a long way to changing.
Yeah, I think,
Getting
I
the
mean,
stigma.
if I had one tip for people, it would be that I think the starting point is to work out what your compensating abundance is, because that's often the thing that you really enjoy doing. It's the thing that really drives your sense of self-worth and your sense of what you can contribute to the world.
Oh, I love that. I really love that expression as well. So, do you have any other top tips that you could give to listeners, even if it's not dyspraxia that they have, but especially if it is, if they're struggling with something in particular and they're feeling shameful about it? So, we've got this one amazing tip about focusing on, say the phrase again. I love this.
Focusing on your compensating abundance and knowing that
Yes.
that's your gift to the world.
Compensating abundance. Oh, I love that. So are there any other tips? I mean, obviously walking worked absolute wonders for you and still does, but what else could people get involved in, do you think?
I think I've thought a lot about this, and I find it quite disturbing. Dyspraxia is now, there's something called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which lists all the mental illnesses, and dyspraxia is listed as a mental illness. Now, I don't
Really?
believe that I'm mentally ill. I don't believe that anybody else with dyspraxia is mentally ill.
Yeah.
But the really disturbing thing is that there are now 3 times as many mental disorders in that book as there were 60 years ago.
Wow.
And I think all this labeling is really unhelpful, because you were talking earlier about identity level, and I think people, and I was guilty of this, you take on that label at an identity level.
Yes.
And we are all more than that. We're all
Absolutely.
capable of more than that. And I think the other slightly disturbing thing is that a lot of the help is aimed at helping you to cope. Now, I remember my coaching mentor years and years ago saying that life is for living, not for being coped with.
Oh, I love that.
And that has a real resonance, because we don't need to be living our lives in a confined way. We don't need to be wandering around thinking there's anything wrong with us. There isn't.
Yeah.
I think because one of the ways in which my dyspraxia manifests itself is I find it very difficult to be physically organized. So my life is often very messy. So my response to that would be to try and be perfect. And I can't remember who, but somebody once said perfectionism is the highest form of self-abuse, and it is.
Yeah.
Because the truth of the matter is, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And whatever you've got, you're no less imperfect than anybody else is. I just think we're all perfect in our imperfections.
Exactly. Yes, I completely agree.
And whatever it is, I wanted to get better at walking, and I've done that. Part of the 5,000 kilometres is that in 2016, I walked 2,000 kilometres by myself from London to Santiago in Spain, which is where the pilgrimages end. And
Oh
I
my
did it without a
gosh.
map because I can't read maps. They used to make me feel sick.
Right.
I've got better with them now.
That's incredible. What do you do to celebrate such an achievement, Elaine? I mean, honestly.
I write about it because I just think it's amazing that we often choose to hold ourselves back when we don't need to. And the other thing I've discovered is that I never ever spoke about my difficulties. I didn't know it was dyspraxia, but I never ever spoke about my difficulties. No one would ever have known what my daily struggles were. No one would ever
Right.
known how hostile I find the world. And now I've started talking about it.
Yeah.
It's completely different, not just for me, but for the people who hear me, because I do a lot of public speaking. And me being vulnerable, me speaking from a wound that's healed, enables other people to be vulnerable as well. And
Yes.
that's a gift.
Absolutely. That's incredible. And you're helping so many people. So what types of things do you write now, Elaine? Do you have a blog or are you working on a book? I mean, this just has book written all over it, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
I started writing it's a cross between a dyspraxia memoir and a Camino memoir, because there isn't a dyspraxia memoir written by an adult with lots of life experience.
Right.
And if you go to my website, which is ElaineHopkinsAuthor.com, you can download 3 chapters of that. But the book that's going to come out first is actually a book of 12 Camino short stories, and each one of them is put in the context of a coaching principle. So I've been very honest about the dyspraxia. There are tales about me getting lost, me screwing up my accommodation, but they all illustrate one of those coaching principles that I live my life by, that have helped me to have a so much easier everyday experience now than I used to have. And that's coming out in spring, probably March next year.
That is so wonderful. I cannot wait to get my hands on that. It just sounds like it is something that obviously if you have dyspraxia, it'd be incredibly helpful, but it just sounds like it's something that is motivating for anybody. Because again, like we've kind of said all through this show, you can take out the dyspraxia and put in pretty much anything else, right? Even if it's not a condition, even if you're just talking about low self-esteem or something along
Yeah,
those lines, right?
yeah, we've all got something that we struggle with. And I often say to people that it's not the dyspraxia per se, that's just my challenge. Well, we've all got challenges. So you can read those stories and they're going to resonate with you,
Yes.
because what they're really about is, how can we make sense of the world? How can we make sense of our own experience and have a better daily experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any top tips that you would like to give to listeners for some steps that they can start taking today that won't be too overwhelming, won't push them out of their comfort zone too far, but can start moving them in the direction, whatever it is that they are dealing with? So, say it's even low self-esteem or even dyspraxia specifically. Anything else kind of in between there where they're just feeling kind of down and out and they're focusing a little bit more on their struggles that they're having, and they're having a hard time kind of interpreting that and trying to shift that into something that is positive. Do you have any tips for them on things that they can do to start having that shift happen?
Yeah, I think a good place to start, and I've just come to this conclusion in the last few days really, is I think it all comes down to our relationship with ourselves.
Oh, yes.
Because I remember the first time my coaching mentor pointed out to me that we all had a relationship with ourselves, and often we didn't even realize that, and it's probably the most important relationship we're ever going to have. I was thinking, oh, yeah, we do. So I think having an awareness of that is a great place to start. And one of the best ways of doing that is to just notice the conversations that are going on in your head.
Yes.
And not just the content. The content's important. Because I used to say to myself multiple times a day, Elaine, how can you be so stupid?
Mm-hmm.
But what's important about that conversation isn't just the words, it's the tone.
Yes.
Because the tone is the most reliable indicator of the quality of your relationship with yourself.
Yes.
So if it's nasty and hectoring and unkind, the first thing you can do is just be aware of that and to decide to talk to yourself more kindly. So I didn't stop saying, oh, Elaine, how can you be so stupid? I didn't stop saying that immediately, but I did change the tone. So it would be, oh, Elaine, how can you be so stupid?
Yes.
And that's different.
Yeah, exactly. So catching it is the
Yeah.
first key, right? Because so many of us do. We talk to ourselves all day long and we don't really give it any thought whatsoever. So a lot of people don't even know what it is that they're saying to themselves. So step one would be listen, actually pay attention to what it is that you're saying to yourself and the tone of it. And then you're saying the next step would be to start kind of challenging that by not necessarily saying, okay, I'm never going to speak to myself that way again. I mean, that's not realistic, but catching yourself when you do and changing the tone. I love that, making it something that's more lighthearted, even though it's the same words.
And just being aware that whatever is going on in your head, it's just a thought.
Yes. Yeah, it's just a thought. I think we spend so much time in our heads worrying about the future and mulling over the past that we create all kinds of situations in our heads that don't exist.
Yes,
or that did exist, but we're giving them life all over again, over and over again, when they're well done.
Yeah, it's not the reality. The reality is this moment now, and really that's all there is.
Yes. So I like that, catching yourself saying whatever it is that you're saying to yourself and then changing the tone so it's more lighthearted is a great way to just kind of bring yourself back to the present, catching yourself in this moment. So once you've done that, do you have a kind of way that you have shifted so that you're no longer actually saying to yourself that you're stupid any longer, a way to replace that script?
I got into the habit of thinking of all that stuff as ANTS, which in my map of the world stands for automatic negative thoughts.
Yes.
So the minute, because I'm very visual, I would see this army of ants marching across my brain. And whenever I knew that was happening, I would imagine myself being a really stroppy teenager again. And I was a very stroppy teenager. And I would just be challenging this instance. I'm not challenging my parents like I did back then, but I would be challenging those ants.
Right.
I'm just thinking, bog off. I don't want you. I don't need you. I'm not doing that anymore. And it's like any other habit.
I love it. Let this stroppy teenager in you out to play. That's fantastic. And you're right, it is a habit. This isn't something that you're going to find yourself doing one time and then, done, cured. You have to stick with it every single day for at least 21 days, don't you? I mean, all the experts kind of are in that realm of 21 to 66 days, isn't it? And it really, I mean, if you think about it, however old you are now, listener, you've been probably saying this type of language to yourself for the majority of those years, probably at least since you were 7, if not before then, right? Like your experience of being a 4-year-old, you probably started with this I'm stupid mantra when you were 4. right?
Yes.
So you've been saying this for the majority of your life. You're not going
Absolutely.
to
Yes.
you're not going to catch yourself saying it, turn it into something that's a little bit, more fun and whimsical with your tone, and then let your stroppy teenager come out one day to challenge it, and then it's all solved. You don't need the same amount of time. You don't need 40 years or 50 years or whatever it's been to combat that, but you do need consistency every
Yes.
single day to make it
Yes.
happen, right? And
Yeah.
you're worth that, right?
Yes, absolutely. Everybody's worth that. And the other thing that has really worked for me is I've developed the ability to laugh at myself. And that came from spending those 20 days with my fellow sufferer on the Camino. So just a quick story to illustrate, because I've always been ashamed of my dyspraxia, if anything happened to me in public that I thought was shameful, I would just fall to pieces. And I knew things had changed when I was on the bus and I got up to leave the bus and I felt myself being yanked backwards. And I thought, oh, what the hell is going on here? And one of the cords from my jacket had got caught on the handle of the seat. So there was me
Oh,
trying to go forward and I was being pulled backwards. Now,
right.
before, that would have been a matter of absolute shame to me, but it was like something out of a comedy sketch. And it was just so
Right.
funny that I started laughing. And of course, I made eye contact with the other people on the bus and they were laughing as well. And they weren't laughing at me, they were laughing with me because it was funny.
Yes. Yes, that sounds like meeting this other woman and the whole walk experience really helped to change your perspective on
Yes, it
on
did.
this, right? Because
Yes.
you feeling like you're not alone, I think
Yes.
is huge, right? It's a huge
Yeah.
factor for anybody trying to deal with anything that's going on in their lives, right? From
Yes.
divorce to like just absolutely anything. Just knowing that you're not alone and being able to chat with other people and realize, oh, other people do these things too, or this has happened to others and whatnot. You can eventually find the humor in
Yeah.
something like that because that is funny, right? I mean, that can happen to
Yes.
anybody.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. This has been wonderful, Elaine. Thank you so much for being on the show. Can you tell everybody listening where they can find out more about you to be able to follow you on social media, learn about the book that's going to be coming out in the spring, and everything else about you?
The best place is my website, which is ElaineHopkinsAuthor.com. So on there, you can read about the memoir that I'm still writing. You can find my blog posts. I've written about dyspraxia on there. I write about the pilgrimage route, obviously, and you can also find all my social media handles.
That's marvelous. And listeners, don't worry about trying to find a piece of paper and a pen to write that down. I'll include not only Elaine's website in the show notes, but I'll also include direct links to all her social media so you can find her nice and easily. Elaine, thank you so much again for being on the show today.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure. I've had a great time talking about my story. Thank you.
You're welcome. What an incredible inspiration Elaine is. She's so right. We are all capable of so much more than we think. I love every part of this interview with Elaine, but there's something she said that really impacted me. Life is for living, not for being coped with. How powerful is that statement? Whatever that voice in your head is telling you, it's your choice to listen or prove her wrong. You don't need to be living your life in a confined way. You don't have to focus on the things you struggle to do. You can choose to focus on the compensating abundance you've developed as a counterpart to whatever deficit you face. And how much do you love that phrase that changed everything for Elaine? Whenever there's a deficit in one part of the brain, there will be a compensating abundance in another. What's your compensating abundance? Whether you're experiencing an illness, disability, or something else that causes you to feel like you are less than someone else, knowing your strengths changes everything because they are there. They're just waiting for you to notice and utilize them. So what's stopping you? Thank you to my guest today, Elaine Hopkins, for sharing her amazing story of transformation from shame to strength, all her tips, and the words that changed her life forever. As usual, you can find links to her website and social media platforms in the show notes. Just visit lifelikeyoumeanit.com/blog. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Life Like You Mean It podcast. Now go make a list of all the labels you've been living with that you can ditch today.
Thanks for listening to the Life Like You Mean It podcast. Head on over to the show notes for this episode and all past episodes at www.lifelikeyoumeanit.com/blog. If you love the show, leave a rating and review. Share that love by spreading the word, post a link to your social media, share it with your friends, and follow or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast hosting site. Thanks so much for tuning in. Until next time, remember to live your life on purpose by living life like you mean it.